Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. My name's Tom Bestwick. I'm a PR and outreach specialist here at Hallmark, a digital marketing agency based in Nottingham. But today I'm talking to a guy that has got a great story to tell. He started his business more than 20 years ago, more than 2 decades ago, and in that time, it has been transformed from a business that was very different when it began and has transitioned with him steering it into the UK's leading packaging and labelling equipment supplier in this country. Today, that guy is Malcolm Little. Malcolm, how are you doing?
Doing very well, thank you, Tom. Nice to see you.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure, Malcolm. It's always a pleasure. We have got a lot to cover over the time that we have got, however long that may be. We've got a lot of different points to cover, lots of different conversation topics that I want to cover with you today. But Malcolm, I want to take you right back to the very beginning. You've got an incredible story to tell. Advanced Dynamics has got this incredible story to tell. And I want to know, to begin with, what made you want to start Advanced Dynamics? What was the vision behind it? What was the inspiration behind why you wanted to set up the business way back? I think it's 23 years ago. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think, first of all, I never actually saw myself as a businessman or an entrepreneur. I think I thought I'd found myself a career home as a salesman. I was thoroughly enjoying that. And even though I say so myself, I was the best salesman in the company. Always a great place to be. And indeed, it's a comfortable place to be. But I had a couple of friends who recently started their own businesses in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, which always engendered a degree of, I wonder if I could ever do that. And it all hinged on an opportunity that came from a previous employer. He rang me out of the blue. We hadn't remained in touch since I'd left his business, but he just explained that 3 guys that I'd met whilst I worked for this particular gent, he said, look, they're looking for somebody to represent them in the UK. Would you be interested? And I always felt it was a decision. The decision to do it was harder to say no than it was to say yes. Because it would always be the case of, look, if I don't do this now, I will always look back and think, what would have happened if? And I do believe life shouldn't have regrets. If you feel like doing something, you want to do something, you should do it to the best of your ability. And it was at that point I decided, yes, it's time to do something. And I thought, I can do this better than I've done it with working for other people. I can put my own stamp on it. So that's where it started from.
Just talk to me about Advanced Dynamics. Why was it specifically that you wanted to go into the industry that you did? Was it purely because you knew it, or was there other reasons behind that?
The industry that I was in was similar to an awful lot of people's careers. I did an engineering apprenticeship for a company that manufactured a wide range of machines, some of which were packaging machinery. And basically, I was planted in that seed bed and stayed in the same way. I was never. You use the experience that you have to drive forward, and there was never a solid reason to move from what I knew.
Yeah, indeed. You mentioned a couple of people within that first answer, sort of somebody came to you with an opportunity and you didn't want to have that regret. I'm just wondering, as a person 20 years ago, you had your friends that had started their own business. Were there anybody that had inspired you? Was it family members? Was it somebody external that sort of really give you the inspiration and the courage to really take this on? Or was it just that drive that you personally have, which is you don't want to have any regrets in life?
I think, yes, I took the question to a number of people, spoke to my 2 friends, spoke to my original business partners about it. But I think it was always a drive that, look, I can do this. I can do this for myself. I can do it in a better way than where I've worked before. Often some of the best life lessons that you get in your career are actually negative lessons, in that you see how it shouldn't be done, and therefore it points you in a direction of where you want to do it. And it was that drive that, look, I have to do this now. I will always look back and say, you should have had a go, Malcolm. It was that internal drive that took me forward.
Just talk to me about those early days then. So you set up Advanced Dynamics. You're a new business owner. You've sort of chucked yourself in at the deep end. You've spoken to your friends about it, and you've got all the advice and tips that you need. What were those early days like? What was maybe the first year like as a business owner? Was it everything you expected it to be? Was there something that caught you off guard? Just talk me through that.
One word: petrifying. Petrifying, because I've said this many times. If I'd have known then what I know now, what I've had to go through, I wouldn't have felt that I had the mettle to get through it. It was very difficult. When you're a salesman or indeed an engineer, you have a job to do, and you know when you fulfilled it. When you find yourself building, wiring, selling, invoicing, doing everything, and everything stands or falls by you, it changes the dynamic in a way that you can never be ready for. So yeah, the first year, in fact, the first good few years were difficult. I started my own business when the packaging industry was very saturated. We found ourselves having to take on very specialized jobs that weren't easy to do. And it was, to coin the blunt phrase of mine, which I've taken throughout my whole career, it was about arse up, head down, keep pushing. It was a drive to make sure this continues that kept it going. Very difficult. And at times, working till 12 o'clock at night all week, working every weekend. If anybody says starting a business is going to be easy, please point them my way. I'm happy to disabuse them of that notion.
Indeed, you were a salesman, Malcolm, so I think you know pressure. I think salesmen have this pressure where they come to work, they know they have to get results, they're the main generators of business. Was it a very different kind of pressure, though, starting the business on as your own owner? Is it a very different kind of pressure?
Very much so, very much so. Because as a salesman, you have the pressure to sell. Once you have the order, you can then relinquish that and you pass that on to the wider company, and then they take care of everything else. When you as a business owner, particularly as an owner-operator in the early days, you do everything. And there are not enough hours in the day. You find yourself going back to use old skills that you haven't used for quite some time. You realize why you moved away from engineering, because you're a danger to yourself. So you go through quite a few band-aids and burn plasters, and you go through all that, and you realize you can walk away from any job unless you own the business. And at that point, you can't walk away. You have a responsibility to keep that business going. And fairly soon we've got people working for us, and as that rolls on, you're not responsible for yourself. You're responsible for other mortgages, other people's lives, and you then take on the pressures of everybody that's working for you. So it's a very, very different situation, different form of stress entirely.
Be honest with me. We've spoken a little bit about regret already in the early stages of this interview. In those early years when things were tough and things were probably not, as you openly admittedly expected, did you regret it at all?
Yeah, to be honest, yeah, there were times at 12 o'clock at night on a company's shop floor with a night shift working around you, completely out of your depth. I just thought, what am I doing here? Why am I here? There was never a chance of me actually giving in, but I have to say I did on a number of occasions think, what have I done? What have I created? I guess I could have walked away from it, but I'm not the sort of person to walk away from something. You have to have, I think, to do what many people do in starting their own business, you have to have some metal inside you that perhaps you never knew was there, because you have to drive through problems. The old adage, let's sleep on it. The number of times I went to sleep not knowing what I was going to do, you sleep on it, you get up in the morning, not quite so bad. Something's just dropped into place in your subconscious and you come up with an idea. And here we are, I wondered at times would I get through my first year, and here we are very nearly 23 years later, and it's a very, very different animal. So it's, was it easy? No. Was it worthwhile? Absolutely.
Especially if you fast forward to where we are today, we can definitely say it has been entirely worthwhile. Something you mentioned at the beginning, a couple of answers back now actually, was if anybody thinks starting a business is easy, point them in your direction. So I guess my next question actually is, for any of those guys that did want to approach you, What is the best piece of advice you would give to somebody now that is starting their business?
Plan more than I did. You need to, it sounds really, really boring, but basically know what you need to sell to cover your costs, know what those costs are, and have a backstop if you're not selling those levels. You have to have a plan. And I didn't have a detailed plan. And to be fair, the minimal plan we had, we kept up with it. A lot of the problems we had were technical difficulties, which has never been my strong suit. Everybody at the company now would say, look, keep Malcolm away from the tools, for Christ's sake. Yeah, it's the boring stuff that can catch you out.
Let's talk a little bit more about Advanced Dynamics now that we have got this fuller picture in front of us and we know what has been achieved over the last 23 years, Malcolm. It's fair to say that a lot has been achieved during that time. I suspect that you have gone through a lot of highs and a lot of lows during that time. What are some of the highlights, though? What are some of the highlights that you've gone through? What are some of the highlights that the business have particularly gone through over the last 2 decades and just a little bit more?
I think that the way I would answer that is, in a way, speaks back to an answer on the previous question about, what tips. 2 really. 1, make every success a highlight, because there will be a lot of negatives. So when things have gone well, learn to celebrate it. You really do need to do that. So I have many, many highlights, from small orders in the early days that really were small value, all the way through to things like the Hallmark years that we did, where we sold massive amounts of equipment to Hallmark greetings card. I think over 3 years we did about £8 million worth of business. Those were some of the happiest and most fun years that I've ever had, because it was like doing business with good friends. Many years going to many times going to Germany with their customers. Good few beers, good few meals out, always making business fun. So there was those times. I'll always look back at my time at exhibitions, that you can have a great fun time, but also we've had years where we've sold £250,000 worth of machines on the stand, and you do that as part of a team. So the team's closely knit, they work well together. Every order that anybody gets is celebrated by the team. So we had great times there, celebrating those times. I think still being at the bar at 3 o'clock with best friends and colleagues. It's not what you might think as traditionals, or the time we got that specific order. It's your highlights are with the people you're sharing the journey with.
It's certainly not the first time that I've heard that answer, so I think a lot of business owners will definitely be able to relate to that. One of the things that I said right at the beginning as part of your introduction is that Advanced Dynamics has gone through not just one transition, but probably multiple transitions over the time that you have been steering the ship, Malcolm. Did you feel that was always going to be the plan, or was that brought on by necessity?
I won't say brought on by necessity. I would say brought on by opportunity. As you go along the journey of running a business, you will always have challenges. Some are problems where you have to work through necessity, but most of our changes have been done through opportunity, where similar to when I started the business, it was, look, if we don't do this, we'll be looking back thinking, what should we have done there? Why didn't we try that? So I would say the key thing is recognizing the opportunity that it's there, and always keeping your eye out for the opportunity, because what you have now doesn't necessarily mean that's what you'll have in a year, 5 years, or 10 years. And by keeping your eye out for the opportunity, that's how we ended up with Advanced Dynamics in its current form, where I joined with a previous business partner, Mike Essler. That seemed like a great idea. We did it and it worked, again, after some hard graft. We had the opportunity of Tom and I are now our managing director, who's taken over my previous position. We met at an exhibition. We got on very well, and even at our first meeting, we said, you know what, sooner or later, we'll work together. An opportunity realised, and Tom's been instrumental in the last 5 years' growth. So it's keeping an eye out for things. You never know around which corner you're going to see a little gold nugget.
I think when I started working with the business towards the end of last year, I was speaking to Tom a lot about that transition when he was part of the business. And you mentioned Hallmark earlier. That's a very different industry from what you're probably doing now. And CBD, the sort of the rise of that was quite a big thing for you guys as a business. When you look back at Hallmark, you think Hallmark it's a huge brand in that card industry. Was it tough to be able to break away from such what was a reliable client to try and break into an emerging new market?
It was a little bit different from that. It was, we saw the writing on the wall. We were at that time, the business was very biased towards the print industry. And I would say to a point of 80 to 90% of our business was in the print industry, and specifically greetings cards. But it had been through lots of changes in the previous 10 to 15 years, but never more so around about the sort of 2008, 2010 mark. And it became quite apparent that lots of companies were shipping their production out to China. Hallmark did that, which was a shock to everybody. So quite rapidly, we had to think, how do we reposition this business? What do we do differently? So it was at that point, or should I say about a year before things really reached the nadir with Hallmark, we'd found Pack Leader. And that was a strategic plan. So it was a conscious decision to make that change.
Yeah, indeed. You mentioned there sort of the changes that you've gone through as a business, and you find Pack Leader, and it's sort of opened up this new market for you, and there's a lot of changes. Tech is really improving by this time and everything else along with it. In terms of the industry and it's changing, did you ever find it a challenge trying to keep up with it, or do you think that partnership with Pack Leader enabled you to keep up with it at a better rate than your competitors were maybe at that time?
I think it did. I must confess, I wouldn't want to look back at the year since 2012 without Pack Leader. We would be a very, very different animal. But Pack Leader, they are very much at the forefront of technology. They're bringing in everything that's new. Do forgive me, technicality, again, not my strong point, but we do have a range of machinery that cover a range of industries that gives us a far broader range, and we can stand our machines up against any company. Germany's famed for being the best manufacturers. I would disagree. We have got in Taiwan the technology and the build quality that can go up against the Germans and the Italians. So that was a critical decision in our history.
What's the biggest change in the industry that you saw? Maybe something that took you by surprise, something you expected that was just totally game changing for the industry that you work in.
A game changer. I think this perhaps doesn't answer the question. One of the problems has been with the packaging industry. It's been stable and saturated for many, many years, which with that's brought an awful lot of, I'll say this, boredom and mediocrity. I think for us, the game changer has been, this is the game changer, selling from a culture perspective rather than a machine perspective. There's been lots of technological changes, but that's been available to everybody. For us, going back 3 years ago, we looked at the way we worked and how we had been successful in a difficult marketplace and realized it was actually ourselves, it was us that made the difference. So we brought that front and center and really, really started to work on culture, focusing on the why we do it, not the what we do and how we do it. Because everybody's got a machine that will work to a certain degree. What they haven't got is us, the way we work and the way we support our customers. So that was the biggest sea change that we've made in our business, the biggest step forward that nobody else, no matter how hard they try, will ever be able to copy.
Culture is a very key point to that, actually. And I think it's something that me working for an agency like Hallam recognises. And I just wonder, as a business owner, how did you go about creating that culture? How did you know what you wanted your company to be? Was it based on previous experience, or did you always have a clear vision in your mind as to this is what the business is all about, this is what I want our people to be all about?
Well, what we did when we look back at how we worked, it became immediately obvious. One, if I can only pick one thing I've done well, is to instill my way of thinking about business and my ethos towards business in everybody throughout the business. And we do have a Yorkshire purpose. That's be right with folk. Now, to translate that into things that will go beyond Sheffield or Nottingham, it's to make a tangible, worthwhile, and meaningful contribution to all our partners, and to do that with style, good humour, and grace. And it's that culture within it and that method of working is the core, and it's come from inside. I believe a company's purpose should be very closely aligned to the leader's purpose, and that's about me. And the berate me folk actually came from my grandma. She once actually said to me, sounds like an apocryphal tale, but I assure you it's true. Malcolm, you'll do all right in life if you just berate with folk. And it's true. If you consider berate with folk, it's just take the right decision at the right time. And when you work with people, your team, make it easy for them to do the right thing. If doing the right thing for them on site is potentially a bit of a risk, and they know they'll get into trouble if they take that risk back at work, they won't do it. If you do not have a fear of failure, your staff on site, your team on site will make that decision what they believe to be right. Therefore, they themselves will become leaders in their own right. So I think that for me is the best thing I can say to that question.
So in terms of that culture, was that something that was ingrained from the very beginning of Advanced Dynamics, or was it something that came later? If it did come later, how long did it take you to instill within the business?
It was always there, because for many years we were much, much smaller than what we are now. We were between 4 and 6 people. We lived and breathed the same air. We worked in the same office. We went out from that office into the shop floor to finish machines. So we just did it. It was only a few years ago when we actually started studying it and thinking about an upfront culture, actually making a thing about it. That's when we said, well, look, what does make us successful? Why does this work? And then that's when our ethos of because it matters, and that's because it matters to us, not our customers. Our customers are the primary beneficiary of because it matters. But those words, because it matters, came out of a brainstorm after about 10 pints in Birmingham between Tom, Matthew, and myself. And that was the first of our punchy lines that we put together. So we've always done it. And then when you realize what it is and what makes you better, and then you actually utilize that. This sounds bad because it makes it sound as though you're being mercenary with it, but you're not. We sell 80% us, 20% machines. And it's by putting that ethos up front, again, like I said earlier, that's what makes you stand out. So it's always been there, but the truth be told, we didn't know what we'd got until about 3 years ago.
One of the things we spoke about earlier was sort of your big successes. I'm interested now, maybe what's your biggest learning curve when you look back over the last 2 decades? Was there a moment that you look back on, could have been either a good moment or a real negative moment that made you stand up and look at being life as a business owner very differently, or view business owner as a very different thing?
I would say it is all and will remain until I retire a massive learning curve. Again, often you take a while to realize what you're going through because you're so busy doing things, you don't realize what you're learning. And I jump back to perhaps one of the questions about one of the highlights. It's only of recent weeks and months I've looked around and realized what we've built here. And I say we intentionally, it's a chosen word, not me. We have built something special. And you are so in the moment a lot of the time. I mean, I don't remember most of my 40s because it was just busy. But I think it's a constant learning curve. the day you think you've got it nailed is the day you've got it wrong. And I think for me, again, growth in the last few years has been around realizing you'll never have all the answers yourself because you don't know enough questions to ask. It's not what you don't know, it's what you don't know that you don't know is going to catch you out. And it's having partners who are good at the art of what's possible. I know I can't fly. If I jump off a bridge, I'm not going to fly. I know I can't fly. But there's lots of things I do not know about. And you need people who are specialists in their field, accountants, solicitors, other engineering companies, peers within the same group, peers outside that group. You learn more when you think, I've never thought that before. And it's keeping your ears and mind open to the things you've never even thought about before. That's how you grow.
Absolutely. Right, we're into the final furlong now. And let's talk about the main reason why we're doing this interview is that this is being tied into the new managing director announcement is going to be coming out for Advanced Dynamics. That will see Tom, and you mentioned Tom a lot within this interview. He's going to be stepping up as managing director of Advanced Dynamics, and you're going to be stepping into an executive chairman role. I want to know, so why did you feel now was the best time? I know over email we spoke and you said it did feel like the right time. What's that reason for you?
I think it's manifold. The first part of it is I can't be here forever. How long will it be before I go? I don't know. But unless you're actually starting to plan for it, you could be caught out. And that's something I genuinely never wanted to happen. I think we always had to have some form of succession planning. I think my mindset changed over last summer. And we knew that with where we were going last summer, we were going to hit Chapter 1's growth plan targets. That was a given. And over my holiday last year, I was one of the few lucky people to get away. I realized that Chapter 2 would be very different. That Chapter 1 with myself with 100% ownership of the business was the right period for me to keep that. And Tom came on board at the very start of that and grew massively, and came on as a young sales manager, rapidly developed to board level position as sales director, and probably over the last 12 months was looking after the detail, effectively doing the managing director's job. The more and more we talked about Chapter 2, I had the realization that it would in fact be quite a stark realization. It would be Tom that drove it more than I. And it was at that point I realized we needed to go forward as a partnership, not as a company owner and a colleague that works with him, but effectively as an employee. We needed to do this together. And I think perhaps some businessmen may have been comfortable with that. I wasn't. So Tom and I talked at some length about clearly the responsibilities he would have to take on, taking on the MD's role formally, and also speaking honestly about becoming a shareholder in the business as part of the MBO. I remember at one of the final meetings, or just before one of the final meetings that really finished off the MBO, it was a point of no return. I rang Tom to say, you do realize this is your last chance to walk away. Because at that point, I guess it takes us full circle, because I know what I went through in my first year of owning a business. It's a very different animal, I have to say. And I genuinely do hope that Tom never, ever, ever has to live through some of the stresses and strains I went through. But I did say to Tom, look, this is your last chance to walk away. And he asked me to explain why. And I said, look, basically, as the owner and majority shareholder of this business, you're now equally responsible for everybody else's mortgages, exactly like I talked about earlier. And that is a tie that you cannot break. Not not knowing how you are as a person. So he loves this business with his whole heart. I know that sounds maybe a little bit too much, but it's not. It's the truth. And I knew in Tom, I had a business partner that would continue to grow the business, even when I'm gone, in the manner in which I would want it to be. So there's lots of things in there, but it was a coming together of parts. My own mental position in terms of being prepared to let go, Tom's development in the business, the clean break between chapter 1 and chapter 2. Who knows what chapter 3 will be? Will I still be in the leadership role? I don't know. Let's crack chapter 2 first.
Yeah, indeed. I want to ask, I imagine your family has been part of this journey with you, Malcolm, right from the very beginning. How were they about it when you told them?
Alison's been I don't have children. I have 2 cats, and as you can imagine, they don't have much input to the business. Sorry, I hadn't planned to say that. That's made myself laugh. But no, Alison's been with me right from the start. She shared the celebrations. She's given me a shoulder to cry on, and she's always made it plain that I will support you in every decision you make. If that's what you feel is the right thing to do, crack on.
The last question I've got actually is, so you passed on to Tom now, and you alluded to it slightly, but maybe you don't know what is next. You don't know how long you can be still part of the business for. You don't know what chapter 3 looks like, when you're going to be part of it. But in the interim, in the immediate future, Malcolm, what is next for you? What are your plans? Is it purely to support Tom now, or is there a sort of a greater vision for yourself?
I would say I can't imagine me ever walking away for good, but I will never hang around if I can't contribute to the business. So I feel I've learned a lot from running the business in 23 years, and I believe there's still a huge amount of stewardship that I can offer, albeit from a little bit more of a distance. I guess that history and what I can do for Advanced Dynamics, I have wondered whether I could get the opportunity to share that maybe with new startups or business embarking on growth, that, fresh business that just, and I laugh at myself by saying if I can provide some experience to people just starting out, I'd get a great deal of pleasure of that. If I can help somebody miss some of the pitfalls, just be that person that says, have you thought about? And they go, no, I haven't, but I'm glad you said it. So maybe some non-exec work would be quite interesting for me. I think certainly in time, I intend to go skiing a little bit more every year, a bit more travel, and certainly a few more driving trips. But it's fluid. It's fluid.
A few more trips to Birmingham for 10 more pints, I imagine.
Well, I would say so. I think that whatever I do, I'll be doing it with a smile on my face, with a bit of good grace. So long as that's the case, I'll be fine.
So you look back on your 23 years, and now you have passed over that MD responsibility to Tom. And what's the overriding feeling that you've got when you look at Advanced Dynamics now? Is it as simple as you're just overwhelmed with pride, or are there other emotions that you feel when you think about where the business is today from where it was when it started?
Need to be careful because I might get emotional. I love the place like a home. I love the people like a family. And yes, I don't like the word pride because it brings with it a degree of smugness sometimes. I do still have, yes, I am proud. It's a fantastic place to be, and people love to be here. And I am humbled by the support I get from my team. It's
been a pleasure talking to you today and sort of reliving the last 23 years. It just sounds like it's been an incredible journey, and thank you very much for sharing it with us. My pleasure, Tom. Great to talk to you.